may thank all the previous speakers. I'm quite honored as part of our party group to have you here in Stockholm today. And thank you so much, all of you, to come here to our seminar. I must say that I think all the three previous speakers have really made a strong case showing the importance of investing in sexually reproductive health and rights. Because sexual reproductive health rights are so important on their own, but also to show that this is crucial in our work to now work with the humanitarian crisis we see in different parts of our globe, in our work to deal with the climate change, but also our work to address the Agenda 2030. Of course, as a Swedish MP, I tend to think, what does this mean for Sweden? And I think that the presentations we have heard today underlines the importance of Sweden really focusing and prioritizing sexual reproductive health and rights in our work with development cooperation. Because I think we need to understand that I guess that most of us in this room and most of us in Sweden agree with Babatunde and other speakers when they talk about the importance of sexual reproductive health and rights. But we also need to realize that in many parts of this world, these are still controversial issues. And we still see that rather few donors are willing to really invest in this area. So I think it's important for us to see and realize in Sweden that this is an area where we can really make a difference, and that there's a great opportunity for Sweden and our development cooperation to add enormous amounts of value by investing and focusing on sexual reproductive health rights.
Thank you very much. And you've been reading this report.
Yes.
And we, from that report, we know that the percentage of the proportion of the Swedish ODA that goes to SRHR is still 6%. And we've been on that level for 5 years now. Why isn't this level increasing?
Well, I must say I'm a bit surprised about these figures in your report, because as an MP, I've been working with Isabel Levin, and before that with Gunilla Carlsson and Hillevi Engström. And I must say that all these three Ministers of Development Cooperation, they have been saying the right things. I have nothing to complain when it comes about the message about the importance of sexual reproductive health and rights. But so far, I must say, I haven't really seen that the message and the rhetoric being translated to an increase in funding when it comes to sexual reproductive health and rights. As you have shown in your report, we can see that the proportion of our budget for development cooperation and the proportion going to sexual and reproductive health and rights have been more or less the same over the years. And I must say, if you, as a government, say that this is a priority for your country, then you need to show us the money. There's not really an alternative to that. You need to show us the money.
Now I want to invite the rest of the panel. So please, everyone who's been here, please welcome Ulrika, Babatunde, Alison, and Karin, and Hans. Thank you so much. We have a few minutes for some few questions. So I would like to ask the audience if we have any questions. Here we have a microphone, and please try to formulate your question as sharp as possible. And also, if you want to address the question to a certain person, also please tell that. So, I'm sure there are several questions. Yes, we'll pick a few questions, so please.
Okay. Prudence Wilfred Berger, PRO Global, Pensioners Without Borders. I really don't have a question. Thank you very much for really excellent presentations. But I have a reflection. Several of you talked about the importance of statistics and being able to track allocations, and I would just like to remind you all that in addition to statistics and our data being disaggregated by sex, they should also be disaggregated by age. We all know that age, whether very young or very old, does not protect against such things as rape and gender-based violence, for example. And also, sexual and reproductive issues are important issues for older people. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pass the microphone. Sorry.
Was as it should be done. It should be sex, age, and geography.
Yes.
So that, nobody's left.
We'll take a few questions and then you will get the possibility to answer. Yes?
Sarah Thompson from CEDA. It's a question for you, Karin. I was interested to hear about WHO's supported country levels in rolling out universal health coverage. One risk that I see with cost effectiveness evaluations on health coverage is that you can end up focusing on low-hanging fruit. That is the most high density areas, those who live near a clinic but who are not currently accessing it for some reason, as opposed to the smaller, extremely vulnerable populations who live far away from clinics. So they're not that cost effective to reach. And yet they have often the highest morbidities and mortalities. I'm thinking of like Karamoja in northeastern Uganda, for example. Small part of the Ugandan population, but extremely high levels of, we have skilled birth attendance at, like 3% or something. Contraceptive use at 5%. So do you agree that that's a risk? And if so, how do you take that into account in your cost effectiveness analyses? Thanks.
Before I answer that, we'll take one last question. Yeah?
Hi, Cecilia Chatterjee-Martinson from WaterAid. It's funny when you look at different sectors, because I think we could have said from a water perspective and sanitation and hygiene, most the similar things, everything starts with water, the cost effectiveness as well. So I was wondering a little bit, we challenged ourselves in WaterAid for Agenda 2030, so how do we do things differently and how do we integrate, which is one of the I think, the key success factors of the Agenda 2030 in general. So we are trying to work differently, working closely with RFSU, closer with WHO, and looking at access to water, sanitation, hygiene from a wider perspective. So my question to all of you is, how will you change and work differently in order to be better at integration and finding synergies with different interventions?
Thank you very much. And that will also be the last question, the first and the last question for the panel, apart from the question that was addressed to Karin. So if we can make a round and then you answer. Thank you so much for giving the question. So if you would like to start, Babatunde?
Well, thank you very much. I want to, and I think that the last question was a very good question in terms of Agenda 2030, because there are 5 principles that were established for Agenda 2030. Integration was one of them, and our ability to integrate and work across silos, which we did not have with the MDGs. So, and I was listening to my WHO colleague, my doctor, so I have synergy with that. But when you model, as they have, for health and health interventions, but you don't model for education, which has a direct impact on what you are looking at. And you don't model for water and sanitation. You don't model for several other things which are in that package. Because that package is a totality. It's a whole government approach to development. It cannot be dealt with on the basis of sectors. If you do it that way, you're not going to get the results you're looking for. So it's not just about water sanitation or health or sexual and reproductive, even though I believe that's the most important. But they all have to come together in order for us to achieve what we are going to achieve. I mean, that includes things like rule of law, good governance, everything comes together. So I just want to say that it's going to be challenging, but it's the best way to go. So when we work with government, we talk to them about being able to do all of this together at the same time, not about just one.
Please, Karin, go ahead. And please try to make it as short as possible.
Thank you. So I agree with both. And definitely the issue of the multi-sectoriality is very important. Just very brief, I think one of the ways to address this is really to work with parliamentary committees who have a responsibility greater, because we come from specialized technical agencies, with specialist mandates, but really in the work we do with parliamentarians, I think this is where we can address the cross-cutting issues. So it's a very important question to raise. On the question specifically on the risks of using cost-effectiveness analysis, thanks for raising this. I didn't emphasize this in my presentation, but actually in the work we do, we routinely emphasize that cost-effectiveness is not the only criteria, and that in these institutions and processes that need to be set up for decision-making, you need a multiple criteria, and these are always context-specific. So it's really up to the countries themselves to define the criteria. In most countries, they use cost-effectiveness, but also feasibility, acceptability among the population. Of course, political importance is very important. And also the cost, of course, the budget impact. But I think one of the criteria that could be used could be the vulnerability of specific groups, could be a specific criteria in those discussions. So again, it really comes down to how do you set up that process within the country institutions and really help decision makers to look at all the criteria that they should consider when they develop their health package. And I think this is where CSOs and countries like Sweden can really make an impact, because we can raise these issues with the specific country institutions.
Thank you.
I have 2 points to make. One is that when you talk about the water, for example, when we have to talk about the climate change, there are so many issues that are important. But I would say that what comes that SRHR is a little bit special is that there is no one else raising the voice if not we do it, because these are sensitive issues, and I think when we are living in a progressive country, there is our responsibility and our obligation to raise our voice, because if we are silent, no one else will speak. So I think that's why it's so important, and it's about core values, really. And Hans said, show us the money, and I strongly believe in that as well, because this is linked with money, but as well, it's linked with leadership. Because we can pour so much money into this, but if we don't have strong leaders who want to make the right decisions and have the courage to do that, we can't go anywhere. And we need to work with governments, of course, but government sometimes is not the key, because governments want to win the next election or so, but sometimes it's more important to work through the parliamentarians, because they are on the ground level, and the parliamentarians are the legislators, and the parliamentarians are the one who's keeping the governments to accountability. So I think we need to what I would like to change. I would like to work more with parliamentarians and build strong parliamentarians who has the courage to make the right decisions.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. 2 very short remarks. First of all, about the question from Sarah, or the question, more remarks from her. I think that there's a risk always that donors focus on the low-hanging fruits, because that's the way to in short term show results. I hope that we have the courage in Sweden to do the opposite, to focus on the most marginalized and vulnerable groups in our work with sexual reproductive health rights. Groups like sex workers, refugees, young women, LGBT persons, etc. And when it comes to your question about how do we integrate and what can we do different, I think as MPs, we are a bit of the experts when it comes to working into silos. We love our silos. But I think we have an important task in our party group to see how can we include and integrate our work with sexual reproductive health and rights into the broader discussions about the Agenda 2030, into discussion about humanitarian crisis, and into the discussion about the climate crisis.
Thanks. Alison.
Thank you. So on disaggregated data, in addition to disaggregation by sex, by age, by geography, also race. I work with the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. In Brazil, if you look at the statistics for indigenous groups, there's such a disparity. So we need race as well. On the integration with water and other sectors, so IPPF does a lot of work on population health and environment programs in places like Madagascar and Ethiopia, just for example. And the data shows that integrated programs deliver more. So talking to fishing communities in Madagascar, they were worried about declining fish stocks. They couldn't feed their families, so we started to talk about overfishing and quotas. We ended up talking about family planning. It made sense to everybody. And on the best buys, yes, IPPF has an explicit focus on reaching the most marginalised and the most vulnerable, who are very often geographically remote. And we struggle to get the funding for that because it does cost more. And that's why we're really, really concerned about the best buy thinking in the global financing facility and how that's going to work in terms of leaving no one behind.
Thank you so much, and thank you once more to this knowledgeable panel and for traveling all the way to come to us to join this seminar today.
I'm going to send my bill to RFSU.
Yeah, just do so. So thanks a lot for that. Minister of International Development Cooperation, Isabella Lövin, and we are very happy that you also had the possibility to come here and to be part of this seminar. And you are the one who is going to give the last remarks and some reflections from this seminar. So a warm welcome to Isabella Lövin.
So thank you very much, dear all. Executive Director, I'm very pleased to be here, really happy to be here. You must all excuse me, I think the whole setup was more that I would give the introductory remarks. However, we have something called the cabinet meeting each Thursday morning between 9 and 12, and then we have some lunch as well. So, I think the parliamentary group knows that as well. So it's a bit challenging for me to do the kind of conclusion or to also give some reactions to what has been said during this morning. So I hope you bear with me if I repeat some of the stuff that has already been mentioned. But I think it's important to come here also to state the Swedish government's true commitment to these really, really challenging questions, and that we need political leadership, as Odeke already mentioned. And I think it's really fantastic to see here representatives from the left party and from the moderate party at the same panels stating exactly, well, more or less, exactly the same things. That shows a lot of political strength that we have here in Sweden and a common view on the importance of these issues. So thank you so much to the parliamentary group for inviting me, and also to the Swedish Association for Sexuality Education for hosting. This week, the Swedish government hosted a very important conference here in Stockholm. It was the ministerial global meeting of the International Dialogue on Peace Building and State Building. And this dialogue is a very, very important